Bienvenidos and welcome to LHC membership webinar. Buenos dias to our friends on the West Coast and buenas tardes to those around the country and the world. Today's presentation is titled Interpreting Latinidad Across Museums and Community, featuring panelists Jenarae Bautista and Jen Edginton. My name is Jennifer Edginton, and I serve as the development manager here at Latinos in Heritage Conservation. Latinos in Heritage Conservation is a national nonprofit, and our mission is to help build a movement that affirms Latinx heritage through education, conservation, and leadership development. Friendly reminder for our live audience, we encourage you all to add questions and comments in our Zoom chat. We plan to have some time for Q&A after our panelists' presentations. And friendly reminder as well that this presentation is being recorded and will be posted to our Latinos in Heritage Conservation website on Monday of next week, so in 7 days. And before we get started, just a couple of announcements. The recording will be posted on our website. You can go to our membership webinars website, you'll see that. And of course, as part of your LHC membership benefits, you get live access to this, a link to access recording immediately after presentation. And of course, you'll see the live presentation as well. We invite everyone to consider an LHC membership. Your membership will give you live access to all of our webinars, discounted registration at Congreso 2024 conference, and much, much more. To purchase an LHC membership, please visit latinoheritage.us/memberships. Of course, a friendly reminder to everyone to please save the date for Congreso 2024. That is our biennial conference, which gathers over 200 professionals, students, academics, community members for 2 days, 3 days of learning and Latinx-centered heritage experiences. This is going to be in San Diego, California, this coming August 8th through 10th. We welcome you all to check that out. And of course, to share some of our upcoming webinars, the other ones we have scheduled for this year. So on September 2nd, we have a great presentation called Labeling Latinidad, Evolving Community Identities. We'll be talking about how we identify and how the language that we use, whether it's Latino, Latinx, Latina, Latine. And that's going to be with Cristina Mora of University of California, Berkeley, and Stephen Moreno-Terrell of Fullerton College in California. And to finish out our year, we'll be revisiting oral histories, interviewing Nuestra Comunidad, Latine oral history projects. This will be December 9th, 2024, featuring a few other wonderful panelists, including our own LHC staff to talk about the Route 66 initiative we're doing this year, Marta V. Martinez, who is up at the Rhode Island Latino Arts in Providence, Rhode Island, and Elena Faules, who works with Latinos in Ohio, coming out of Columbus, Ohio. She's currently in San Antonio, but that was a major project of oral history that she did there. We'll be reflecting on all of those. Okay, and we have an amazing panel of 2 museum professionals who I deeply admire, who've inspired me in my own career, and I'm super honored to introduce them to you today. Let me just, I think at this point, I can't stop sharing screen. All right, and to start some introductions, I have a newly degreed Dr. Jen Edginton. She just defended her dissertation on Friday of last week, so a few days ago. We're so glad that you're here to help us with your presentation. Jen Edginton has over 20 years of experience working in museums. She has held positions at institutions like the Museum of Science and Industry, the Field Museum, Napier Settlement, and the Kenosha Public Museums. Currently, Jen is the interim director of the Illinois State Museum. She has a bachelor's degree in anthropology, a certificate in museum studies from Michigan State University, and a master's in curriculum and teaching from University of Kansas. And like I mentioned, she just recently defended her dissertation titled Adversaries to Allies, a call to action for turning settler colonial museums into indigenized spaces at university. This was done at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay in the First Nations education program. So congratulations on that. Her overall work focuses on building community-driven collaborations in museums and making museums more empathetic and inclusive spaces. Our other panelist is Jenarae Bautista, who is currently a collections manager at the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. She has a BA in anthropology from the University of Texas Pan American. Yay, we both went there, so that's a great, I have to shout out to the Bronx. And also a master's in museum studies from the George Washington University with a focus in collections management. She has spent the last 7 years working for the Smithsonian with the focus in exhibit development and collections care. One of Jenarae's proudest career achievements is being a member of the exhibit team for the inaugural exhibit in the Molina Family Latino Gallery within the Museum of American History. If you're ever up there in DC, please go check it out. It's an amazing experience and something wonderful to see. All right, and finally, I'd like to share a shout out to the third Jen on the call with us. She's in the background helping with the back end. So if you have anything questions in the chat, please put them in. She'll help communicate those. And she's our newest LHC staff member, Jennifer Rivera. She's originally from La Tierra de Gigantes, Carolina, Puerto Rico, and now lives in South Dakota. And she serves as our LHC's administrative specialist. Like I mentioned, helping monitor the chats, and we really appreciate your help. Okay, with all that said, I'm gonna go back to sharing screen, and Dr. Jen Edginton will take us away on this presentation. Give me 1 second to get this up. Okay, and with that, sharing, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. And I'm very excited to be here with all of you as well. I'm Jen Edginton. I am the interim director at the Illinois State Museum, which is located in Springfield, Illinois. We are the non-Lincoln Museum. We often get that question. However, we also have satellite sites around the state of Illinois. We used to have more, but unfortunately in 2015, the governor at the time shut down 2 of the facilities permanently and shut down the system overall. The museum was able to reopen about a year later, and we're still rebuilding from that. A lot of people recognize that the Illinois State Museum was the last institution where Cinnamon Kent-Legutko worked during her time. So I learned very much under her tenure here as well as from her. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. And Renee, if you can do next slide. Just a little bit about me. As I said, I'm the interim director of the Illinois State Museum. I have been for a year and a few months. Hopefully soon we know permanent director status, but in the meantime, I'm also doing the director of interpretation role as well. So I'm over exhibits, education, visitor services, and our satellite sites in Lockport, Illinois, as well as Lewistown, Illinois. That's my email address if anyone is interested. I am also really interested in entering this work as a Latina myself. And seeing how we can find community within Illinois, in my case, or bigger Midwest. So just a little bit about ISM, if you have never heard of us, never been here. Like I said, we are in the middle of Illinois. We're not a Chicago museum. We really are state government and kind of some cornfields around us, which is great because that gives us an opportunity to really focus on the entire state. So we focus on the natural science, the art, and the history of Illinois. We are seen as the museum for Illinois. We have around 13.5 million objects right now, and we are almost 150 years old as an institution. So we're coming up on that 150 anniversary. So what we're doing, we are changing. We have known that there's some work that we need to do. And before I got here, the staff, the board, our parent agency, which we are part of the Department of Natural Resources, really started prioritizing DEI initiatives. And so a lot of the work that we're doing now is new to us. And we're really working in the field to understand how we can be leaders in Illinois in this work. So one of the big things is we are working in community. So we are not telling other people's stories, we're inviting them to tell their own stories. We are making sure we're telling all stories of Illinois. We celebrate the diversity of fauna, floral, and people in Illinois. We also have a heavy relationship building with our tribal communities. So Illinois is a removal state. As of 2 weeks ago, we finally got a federally recognized tribe for the first time in 150 years, I believe. And so we now have one tribal nation in Illinois. However, we have up to 30 and beyond that we should be working with that were removed from our state. So we have been working to establish new relationships to ensure that the tribal communities tell their own stories and have a voice at the State Museum. And then lastly, we're working to bring ISM out of our building and into our communities. And so some of the projects that I'm going to tell you about are new initiatives that I've started in the last 3 years since I've gotten here that is bringing in Latinx and Hispanic history, culture, and lifeways into our museum, but then also out of our museum. So I'm going to start with, I think, my favorite one, and that's on the next slide, Renee. Oh, I lied. I added one slide today. So I wanted to talk about in the Midwest. Oftentimes in the Midwest, Latinx, Hispanic culture is kind of ignored. I've lived here my whole life. I've worked in museums that are around the Midwest, in Kenosha and in Chicago and in Michigan and now in Springfield. And really our story is not told. It's starting to be told in different ways. Things like Day of the Dead might come up, or a very temporary exhibit. But for the most part, Latinx history is not being told in the generic exhibits. So if you go somewhere and there's a history of the community, oftentimes we are left out of those stories. We are also left out of the collections. We're left out of the educational programming. So with this call to decolonize and to be more inclusive, we're starting to see more museums pick up on stories and be more reflective of people like my family or, in community members who are often left out of museums. So in Illinois in particular, we have around 13.8% of our population that are Spanish speakers at home. So we know that we need to do better at reaching those audiences. We need to start creating more opportunity for bilingual labels, bilingual experiences. We also know that over 2.3 million people identify as Latinx or Hispanic in the state of Illinois. And currently, again, their needs are not being met at a museum. So as we enter this work and pulling from that newfound doctorate degree, I did want to bring in two really key elements of why sometimes that happens. And that is commission and omission. And this is not my own work. It's Stephanie Freiberg and Ariane Eason, who really are looking at Native populations in media and textbooks, but it can be applied to Latinx in museums. And that is, oftentimes there's a commission or an omission. So a commission is when we are talked about. In this case, an Indigenous person is talked about. But oftentimes it's stereotypes. So it's only in Day of the Dead type exhibits. It's only in September 15th to October 15th, right? And so it's reinforcing those messages that are sometimes put on us that reinforces misconceptions in mythology. Omissions are when we're simply not there. So I would argue a lot of times in museums, especially in the Midwest, omissions is the way that usually are the depictions of Mexican Americans, Latinx, Hispanics. We're just not in the story, even though we are on the landscape. So to combat this, we need to look to the community. So it can't just be that we throw in one mention of Latinx history, but instead we need to turn to the communities in which we're supposed to be serving and ask how they want to be shown, how they want to be in the exhibits and in the space. And so that's what we've done at the Illinois State Museum. And one of the ways we've done this is this amazing project that is thanks to the International Coalition for Sites of Conscience, which we've received a grant from. And in this project, we are one of about 10 organizations who are partnering with a community to rethink how museums show up for that community. So we're trying to work at rebuilding something internally because of our work in the community. And so originally this project was taken on by Cinnamon, and with her passing, it came to me. And I thought really hard about who I wanted to connect with. And of course, with my own roots, being a Latina in the Midwest, I knew that I wanted to bring in those stories that were missing. And so I partnered luckily with Jose Burgos, who is our engagement officer, outreach officer for Department of Natural Resources. And he's Chilean. So he's fantastic because he can actually translate very quickly into Spanish to English, because I don't speak Spanish because of assimilation, right? My grandma was forced not to speak Spanish, and it has kind of spiraled to the point where I can understand it, but I don't feel comfortable speaking it even to these very forgiving kiddos. So this project is, we're working with a high school Spanish club in a small migrant community called Beardstown in central Illinois. This town is a really interesting community about an hour away from Springfield, located on the Illinois River. And this community has French speakers, Spanish speakers, and English speakers. And it's really seen as this kind of melting pot of community. And so we wanted to work with the Spanish Club, which you see here is around 60 plus members for a high school Spanish club, which is amazing. It gives those students an opportunity that don't feel very comfortable speaking English in class, a place that they feel comfortable. And we're asking them to change how the museum operates through one thing or another. So we've had some brainstorming with them, and my personal favorite was change the outside of your museum so it doesn't look so sad. But we've given them the opportunity to give us recommendations. Last week, we took them on a hike at one of our museums, and we spent about 2 hours outside with them. And then we had lunch together and thought more about this. Next week, they're hosting a carnival and invited us to have a booth there. So it's really this amazing relationship where we go to them, they come to us, and we have these really large scale discussions. And some of the big takeaways are the students are recognizing how much work goes into building trust. Because when we first walked in the room, they didn't want to share with us. And now they're ready to kind of share, and we show up. We've been asked to chaperone dances. We've been asked, so it's this amazing relationship that is completely different than anything I've done in museums. But it's so authentic and appropriate. And these students are the ones that are leading what we do. So next year is year 2. Most of the students will stay the same because they're sophomores and juniors. And we're looking at how do we tell the story of a student, and this is their decision, a student who was deported because of their family, and they want to make sure that that story is told. So we're working together to build some kind of installation together, some kind of way to make sure that these stories of their community members who they miss are told in real time. Next slide, please. And these are the students enjoying the museum. None of them had been to a museum prior to this visit, and they had never been to our museum. So they had a lot of fun, and we kind of let them roam the museum, and we were just there to answer questions. And it was fun to see what they got really excited about. And this river was one of the things that they were there for. And another big project I do is a Day of the Dead, even though I talked about how that shouldn't be the only program that you're engaging with Latinx community members, but this is a really important one. So we have a family day, and then we have an exhibit. And again, this is only our 2nd year of doing this. I brought it with me, and so it is new to us. But on our family day, we work with the local university. So they have a dance program, and their ballet group actually comes and performs in the middle of the exhibit. So that's what you see in the middle. We also want to make sure that students, so this is the Beardstown group engaging in the space itself on the side. And then we also have music, dancing. we actually have gotten a grant every year, and we've been working with the Hispanic Women of Springfield, which is a local kind of community care group. And then the school, and we also partner with a local restaurant and provide tamales for everyone who comes. So it's a way for us also to celebrate with food, which is so essential in our culture. So you see the lovely dancer in the corner. She will travel all the way from Chicago just to be at our events. And then I think I have one picture of the exhibit. So this is the Day of the Dead for the last 2 years. So you can see the Hispanic Women of Springfield off to the one side that's really well done. They bring around 12 people to spend about 2 days installing their altar, their ofrendas, which until this exhibit, there wasn't a place to do that in Central Illinois. So this gives them an opportunity to celebrate, to really showcase our culture and what it means. And so you'll also see on the other sides, we worked with the Mexican Cultural Center of DuPage, and they have these maquetas of alebrijes that are up. And so that was our first year, which was really fun to see and make those connections of, hey, Coco was an amazing movie, but let's make sure we get things straight. And then the other ofrenda, which doesn't look like your traditional one, is actually one that our museum staff members put together. So I am the only staff member of Hispanic or Latinx descent on staff. However, our staff felt it was important to have a staff ofrenda. So they actually went through the collections and found things that represented the 4 elements that they wanted to display. All of our labels in this exhibit has been bilingual in the last years. They were written by students from the university, and they were paid for their work. So we wanted to make sure that this experience was as bilingual as well as led by the community as much as it could be. I believe that's it for me right now. I know that I had a short time. I hope I didn't go over, but I'm happy to talk more about our programming, especially as it pertains to education and community building in the question and answer portion. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing what you've been doing. It's all just amazing. And yes, and when we get to the Q&A, we'll get into a little bit more of a discussion. And thank you once again. So once again, it's Dr. Jen Edginton. She just presented. One quick question, actually, before we get to the end. Where could we find out more if we want to follow the ISM?
Great question. And that is on our social media, where you can find us at the Illinois State Museum or on our webpage, which is illinoisstatemuseum.org.
Okay, perfect. All right, and with that, we'll bring in our next panelist, Jenarae Bautista, and you're welcome to start sharing screen.
Great.
Perfect. I see what you have.
I go, come on, slideshow. There we go. Okay. Renee, keep me on time if I ramble on, which occasionally happens. But it's great to be here and speak with everyone today. Of course, my name is Jennifer Bautista. I work here at the Smithsonian, and I do love my job. All right, like I said, museum specialist, it's a very general term used for government employees, and this basically can encompass a registrar. This can encompass, a collections manager like myself, somebody who does conservation. Also, this term is from the 60s, so to me, it's super outdated. But like I said, I do exhibits. 4 are listed here, and we mentioned them a little bit. Presente, a Latino history of the United States, and De Última Hora, Latinos report breaking news, are the 2 that I'm going to briefly talk about. The other 2 exhibits I also manage here at the museum, but don't have as large of Latinx component. Maybe they're bilingual, maybe they do have some stories about, Chicanos in the United States, or representation, but I'm going to speak about the other 2. One, they're a bit more recent, and they've been truly a pleasure to work on. Been really excited. So first off, the Molina Family Latino Gallery is actually part of the National Museum of the American Latino. So I work here at American History. the one that's got the Star Spangled Banner and, you know, George Washington's uniform. And this is a new museum that will soon be on the mall. It was created in 2020 through legislation, and, you know, it was a collaborative approach. So this museum got the funding. They got this large donation and said, hey, we're going to basically create a mini museum in this gallery space. So within 4,500 square feet, they've created this immersive experience to give you a traditional museum setting while also giving you, you know, a little bit of universal design, trying to be at the forefront of a museum and exhibit development. So there will be tactical experiences, you know, that can be sight, sound, touch, smell even. And that's something that is definitely not seen in other parts of this museum. And the reason I'm so proud of it is simply because it's hard enough to get, you know, Latinx representation in museums, and to say that I did the collections for this one, holy moly, that's like a huge honor. Just wild to me. One element in particular about this exhibit that was really fun and I think pushed the boundaries is, like I said, this full sensory experience. So one object in particular is of a Cuban refugee raft. You can see in the two photos here, it was 3D scanned. It was treated because it was collected in the 1990s when it was pulled, you know, out of the Gulf of Mexico. And there is still tar on it. It still smells like cigar paper. We think that that bluish, you know, is like a shower curtain. It's deteriorating. So there's like a mix of everything, and it's been captured so that we can then share it, you know, worldwide. So anybody with access to the internet can get a sense of this. The image at the bottom you can see is where it is currently installed. It is a reflective space. It has, you know, auditory, you know, water, ocean sounds that can be very calming. There's also an olfactory experience where you can engage and sniff what this would have smelled like. My opinion smells a little bit like coconut sunscreen, but it's to really put the visitor in this space of reflection. And I put, you know, this complex object installation because the raft weighs about 200 pounds and was put into this custom built exhibit case that I'm gonna tell you, you know, fits perfectly on all sides. You maybe have 2 inches of clearance. Also, it was a very female heavy crew, so gotta represent that, and that was really proud. But then going through it, we noticed, you know, what we thought was going to be great for universal design, what was going to be great, and what visitors wanted to see, you know, maybe not so much. They wanted more representation. They wanted more stories. I mean, I myself, you know, have admitted that I love this exhibit, but doesn't have enough South Texas history, you know, woven into those stories. And that's where I'm from. So I wanted to feel represented. So again, moving forward, we can continue to improve on that. One of the challenges of a big show like this is that, if you can see from the image, there are so many artifacts in this space. It can be overwhelming. And I mean, that's kind of the goal, is you want to see as much as you can and what a Latinx experience is, because you know, everyone's got this individual experience, where they come from, how they grew up, you know, and what that means to be part of this community. So like I said, there's not enough, in my opinion, South Texas representation, but you know, you can see the influence of, you know, modern day history. We've got a little bit of music elements. You can see, you know, Celia Cruz's dress, which was a big, you know, fan favorite. You've got the political buttons, because remember, we've also got to be partisan. We've got to show everything, and we can't appear one-sided. And I thought that that was really good, that we were just trying to put history out there, be like, history is messy, it is not perfect, and you know, here's where we're at. So we're continuing to improve on that. We are trying to rotate in new objects and artifacts. Again, my background is in collections care, so I like to focus on longevity of objects. So again, a lot of the costumes and textiles will rotate every 6 months. So if you happen to be local, or if you really like to come to DC, every 6 months, there will be different outfits and paper artifacts in the gallery, which is really amazing because, again, we are just trying to share it with the public. It can be very time consuming and expensive. Genuinely gets very expensive. And then another show that I've worked on recently opened last year, De Última Hora, Latinos Report Breaking News, is really, I love it. Oops, jumped one. I love it simply because it's all about Latino journalists. Like, it's showing that like women are there in the forefront. And we're highlighting, you know, these 7 journalists here who are at what we're calling the forefront and breaking the first draft of American history. So we want to give credit to the women that came before. There are little snippets. We do talk about Jovita, but these women, we have artifacts that connect them to specific moments in history. So we will have one that covers specifically 9/11. We have a story that's hitting the Vietnam War. We've got another one that's talking about Black Lives Matter, you know, marches. And I do encourage you to check out the website, or again, if you're in DC, that might hit a bit more. I know that it's difficult, but we do have some digital content as well as oral histories with all of these women who are all still alive and being amazing, by the way. They are just so inspiring. This woman right here, that is Lori Montenegro. She works for Telemundo here in Washington, DC. So again, here is another case, and this is where I mentioned these snippets and these times in history. So we've got Black Lives Matter in one section on the left, and then we've got a story highlighting September 11th on the right. And we have artifacts from those moments, from those events that give you that impact of what was going on. What were these women facing while they were covering these stories? The backpack, if you can see on the left, Lori Montenegro used it to shield herself when they were shooting rubber bullets into the crowd. And she kept reporting. She was like, I have to document this. I have to do my job. The same thing. There is a blazer and blouse that you can see on the right side. Blanca Rosa Vilches was wearing that when she was reporting on Ground Zero. And there is video evidence of her running when the first tower came down. And we actually have that in our digital element for this exhibit. And she's interviewed, you know, saying, well, how was it? And she's like, you know, I was running to safety, but I had to do what I had to do. You know, this is for the people. And my understanding is she reported for 3 days straight in that outfit because there was not enough Spanish speaking reporting coming out of that area. And we do know that there was a large Latinx population, you know, that was affected and that was lost, you know, during this event. So it's just, I'm sorry, it's just the objects, the artifacts are what really hits you. You've got this, you know, poster that was made for a protest, for a march, and then you've got the stairwell sign from the 102nd floor that was recovered from the site. Like, I always look at what the stories that the artifacts can tell us and how, as a museum professional, I can share that with someone who may not be as much of a museum nerd as myself. And then one more side of the other side of the case where we highlight 2 other journalists, 3, sorry, and those moments in history. Marilis Llanos, you can see she works for Telemundo in Miami. So she was covering the Cuban refugee crisis in the 1990s. And you can see the image on the left is her interviewing somebody, and we got that same shirt. You know, we said, this is how we can connect the stories that, yes, this is real. You know, this is how it happened. And then the same thing on the right side, you've got the suede jacket that Maria Elena Salinas wore when she interviewed Subcomandante Marcos in Mexico, I believe in the 1980s. And that was really a big deal because he did not give interviews, and this was the first of its kind. And she, you know, was prepared. She did her job. She did not care about the danger. She wanted to get the story. And again, like, man, these women are so inspiring. And I was really fortunate to be a part of this. And this exhibit, one, it covers these specific moments. Yes, we are highlighting this women, but it does not detract from the work still being done out there, as well as highlighting up and coming reporters, or also sharing how social media is playing this next phase of reporting. So, you know, what's going on across the world. And we do try to highlight that and encourage everybody to go to the website, keep looking to see what else is out there. And then I know I chatted for so long talking about exhibits and their and what they mean to me and the work that we're trying to do here at this museum, which is only a drop in the bucket. We're really trying, but I wanted to end it, you know, with some of the fun stuff and showing I tried to find my favorite like Latinx objects in the collection. So we have the Puerto Rican flag cape that belonged to Walter Mercado. It is going on exhibit in 3 weeks. So again, if you happen to be in DC, come and check it out. It will be in the Molina Gallery. At the moment, we do have a lowrider on display, Dave's Dream. It is from New Mexico. We collected it in the 90s. It's really cool that we have it out. We have these in the collection. We just don't always get the opportunity to share them. We do have a Hamilton costume worn by Lin-Manuel Miranda, collected a few years ago. Not currently on display, but it will be in a couple years, or it'll be back on display. I'll admit that the Star Wars droids are not necessarily Latinx. They are in our robots collection, but it was recently May the 4th, so I just thought someone might appreciate that. Those guys are currently on display in Entertainment Nation in case anybody, you know, really into pop culture. So again, talking about like the mic cubes that we have here from Telemundo 51 out in Miami. So Marilis Llanos was like, oh yeah, those, I totally used those. And we collected them from her. There's deterioration. There's a lot of like sun damage and wear, which I really loved, because again, shows you it's not fake. This is so real. Like, you know, it was used and we're just trying to preserve that. The necklace belonged to Celia Cruz. We had a large donation from her estate a few years ago, and then we did borrow some other items for an exhibit. And this is a necklace that I helped package and return to the estate in Miami. Then a couple more. So, you know, we've got graduation regalia. We do have a large collecting initiative right now, an oral history project to document these kinds of stories. So this one in particular, Jairo Javier Morales wore it to graduation. And my understanding is that when he was crossing the stage to receive his diploma, he pulled out his wings and, you know, was making that statement that he was no longer afraid. So he was a DACA recipient. And then, you know, his cap is really cool. I'm one of those people Mexico sent. So it's like, more power to you. Of course, Selena's iconic all leather outfit is actually the outfit that was used for her statue. If you pay attention, that is the same outfit that they've used to depict her in her statue that is in Corpus Christi. The outfit itself, the one you see there with the pants and the boots, is currently on display, and that is how it looks. They wanted to give it a little bit of an edge, a little bit of motion. And then the image on the right is when it was mounted for 3D scanning. So if you're curious, you can see a 3D scan of her jacket and the bustier. And then a couple more. So we have a costume that we borrowed for a television exhibit from a few years ago, La Boriqueña. So that is a graphic novel depicting Puerto Rican superhero. And we had it standing next to Linda Carter's Wonder Woman outfit, which by the way, she's also Latina. So it was amazing to have this like juxtaposition. But one thing about exhibit work and what I do, and this is where I will nerd out a little bit, you see the image of what the hero looks like, and then you see the image of what the costume looks like. This is a cosplay costume that was made for somebody else, but we were not going to take away from that part of the story. So we were not going to fit it. We're not going to try to shape it to make it look disproportionate or like something that it's not. The person who wore this a little bit on the shorter side had fuller hips, and we were going to make it look as such. And again, that's with my work, I think that it's so important to highlight that extra element of it's not just a costume. It's the person that, you know, wore the costume, and what did that mean? You know, what does this mean to the story? And then last object is a basketball uniform worn by Rebecca Lobo, who played for the women's national team, went to the Olympics, played in the WNBA. The same thing, look at that, it's a looser fitting uniform. They weren't trying to make it something that it wasn't. This costume is currently traveling with our girlhood exhibition, and it will not be on display once it returns. So again, getting 3D scans, getting photography as a way to share content has been a big thing. And that's about it. And then of course, Rosita, just kind of trying to bring it home. Well, we do have a handful of Muppets and puppets from Sesame Street and Kermit, but that's about it. And thank you so much. This really was a pleasure. I'm so sorry if I kept rambling. I'm just really excited about my work.
Yeah, no, it's amazing, and we're excited to hear about this work. And I'll ask you the same question I asked Jenna Edginton is where can we find out more?
I should have put the website americanhistory.si.edu, and any of our social medias will have more content,
Definitely.
especially if you're looking for those oral histories.
Yeah, the oral histories of 3D scans you mentioned, right?
I can
Cool.
send links, or let me try to find some.
Sure, no, absolutely. Yeah, we'll put them in the chat, and yeah, Jennifer's a
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah.
Yeah, so with that, we'll bring Jen Edginton back on, and thank you all both so much for sharing this presentation. Friendly reminder to our folks in the room that you're welcome to ask questions in the chat, or if you are so inclined, you're welcome to come use your audio if you can, or video to ask questions. But we're open to any questions for you all, and I have a couple questions to kind of get us started. So wonderful. I mean, this just great to hear kind of the progress, the things that are being done, the recognition of omissions, all those things. I think to kind of ask about this thread of community, right? What's the kind of impact you see on the community with these works? Not just in displaying, the artifacts or anything, but the stories being told, the oral histories, like you mentioned, some of the students that come in. Yeah, what's the impact that y'all see, and maybe the growth of that? And I'll let Jen Edginton go first, as she presented first.
Ooh, good question. I think one of the things about my community work right now is it's centered in youth a lot, and the youth telling their story, which oftentimes doesn't get to happen, right? Youth in general are a lot of power is taken away from them. We tell them when to go to school, we tell them when to brush their teeth, we tell them what to think. So giving them the options to really think about how they show up in museums has been amazing to watch, from kind of that hesitation to let us into their space to telling us that our building looks sad and tired, right? So I think that there's been this building, and one of the things that has struck me in particular is being a Latina, and we know that there's not a lot of museum professionals who are of Latinx and Hispanic descent. Being in that space is something that's really exciting, because I have now one student who's ready to run a museum. Like, in her eyes, being exposed to these careers, getting to see the operations behind the scenes, she's ready, right? Like, I think if she graduates high school tomorrow, she's ready to walk into a museum, according to her. But I just feel like that's one of the biggest trade-offs that I have seen, is this representation that I didn't recognize as being so important, right? Like the career aspect. But I think it's also been really fun. There was one time for our Day of the Dead Family Day, where the student achievement coordinator, so the staff member at the local university, got up on stage and said that our culture is museum worthy. And the whole room started clapping and cheering. And I looked around for the first time in a museum in the Midwest, and it was people that looked like me, people that probably had similar, backgrounds as I did. And it was this really remarkable moment to go from a very Eurocentric place into a new future. And so I think that that's really amazing to see the buy-in and the importance now of museums, where our demographics have shifted, our visitors have shifted, and we now are a lot more for everyone and by everyone, which is great.
Cool, thank you. And just to share, I'm sure that that student who is so inspired to, really want to get into museums, I'm sure you being in that position is also like a key to that, seeing you running the place and, doing so much. Cool. Jenarae. So yeah, the question, what kind of community impact do you see from representation?
Similar to Jen, again, we're in a different setting a little bit, being a national museum, both the Latino Museum and the general American history one, but it's simply just giving us a platform and a seat at the table. In 2019, our new director at the time said every exhibit moving forward will be Spanish and English. Too bad, so sad we are doing this. We need to be, open and accessible to our visitors, because we were identifying that there were more Spanish speaking visitors. And we just said we want to be welcoming to that. And of course, we've had some pushback from the opposite direction of like, why do you have both languages? We don't need that. But I've seen a handful of people come in and just say, I feel comfortable. It was easier also for my in-laws who are immigrants from Mexico to come in, and I could just leave them alone and say, okay, go explore, like we'll see you in a bit. And they got to see what they wanted to see, versus me or my husband having to go around and maybe translate or explain, in depth about what they were looking at. And I think giving somebody some space, I think looking to the younger generation to help, open our minds a bit. The older generations can be a bit stubborn in my experience, but we can keep learning, like we can keep going. So again, just giving us space. And again, I think language has been the biggest victory.
Interesting. Yeah, language as a victory that we're working for, but also even as the bridges of community. And I'm gonna bounce back to Jen. Tell me more about that Spanish club, because like the Spanish club in high school, and even the Spanish classes that you would take, like from my experience in South Texas on the border, it was focused on language. We were tested, we were taught language, but it always had an element of culture, of geography, of history, and here it looks like even arts and exhibitions. So how has the Spanish club, the specific club that you're working with, like out of language, they've done so much more, right? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it's really serving as an opportunity for kids that maybe don't feel comfortable with their English skills yet, or in their space overall. Most of them are first generation, if not immigrants themselves. And so it's this opportunity for them to feel safe in a school setting, which sometimes school's not set up for everyone's success, right? And so this is an opportunity where they have a teacher who cares deeply. They have community within, and the fact that it's a pretty small high school and 60 of the kids, and it's growing, are in the Spanish club, I think shows how important that club is to the students. And so Beardstown is really unique. There are around 21 different languages spoken there, as kind of like the rumor. And it's mostly based around a meat packing plant. And so workers from all over the world come to this small town and work there. So the students themselves are from all over Latin America. And so it's been really interesting. And I've learned a lot where we showed them the ofrenda exhibit, and we had some kids say, this isn't our culture. Like, what else do you got? Come on. And one kid hand drew what he would like to see, and I have it somewhere in my office, was something to celebrate him and his family as well as his friend's family. So it's been an interesting place where these students finally feel like they have some ownership over not only the museum, but I mentioned earlier that they asked us to chaperone a dance. So myself and Jose, we've kind of laughed and said that we want to be like the fun uncle and auntie of the group. But they wanted money, and we have money to pay for their help, right? So we're not asking for free labor or anything. And they wanted it because they were tired of people misunderstanding their music, and they wanted to show how their culture dances in their music. And so that was why they wanted to throw this big dance and why they invited us as chaperones. So it's a way I feel that these students we've all been teenagers, it's super awkward, super uncomfortable, but they found this community within the Spanish club, and it's moving away from the language and more as a support network.
Cool. Great. That's interesting to hear about how Dia de los Muertos, how they had, criticisms about it. It's like, well, this isn't maybe what we practice. It's not from my region, my faith, whatever it may be. So that's interesting that the diversity there kind of challenged, like, hey, we're more than just this one thing. And I think you mentioned that in your talk as well. And I'll ask this back over to Jenarae. So speaking of diversity, right? I mean, South Texas, right? You got that Stripes Cup in there though, right? And I don't know if you want to share that story, but we both have our South Texas perspective. We're both kind of from there and everything, and we definitely want to see more. But we both worked at the Museum of South Texas History, tons of very Mexican based history. But even then, the realization that the community is much more diverse, and we need to address that as well. So how at your museum is that really being shown, even in the Molina Gallery as well?
I would joke it's still an uphill battle, at least for me, to feel represented. I am fourth generation Mexican American. My family's been in South Texas for 150 years basically, and finding something that represents me is not always easy. And I don't speak for everybody. I don't speak for all Mexican Americans. So I keep trying, but we have a small Latinx community here at the museum. So in both, curatorial, collections work, PR work, education, and to give you a scale or a scope, we have 200 plus employees and less than 20 identify as Latinx. Unfortunately, we have lost a few people to amazing opportunities, but we just do not have the representation in the building yet. We're trying, we're really trying. So I joke, I just keep it an uphill battle. Like Renee said, I was able to donate a striped cup. If you're familiar with the regional gas station of Stripes, which can be found in the Southwest, they were bought out, I think, by Valero. But anyhow, they have extremely large, big gulp sized cups. And I was able to procure 2 64 ounces and donate them to the museum, which the curator in charge of the exhibit was losing it. She was like, why is it so big? And I was like, everything's bigger in Texas. And of course, it was just nice to have that little bit of influence. And yes, the cup is still on display, highlighting that it is a regional, it's a regional object. So that little bit of South Texas history is here, but we shouldn't be known simply because we have large cups from the gas station. I'd just like to add that.
And that's great. And sometimes those artifacts are things that just we don't think much about, but they really do tell about life and just identity representation. So that's interesting to hear from you how the staff itself is almost like a community bridge, because without those folks being from those backgrounds, it's tougher to engage with the community there.
Definitely. Yeah, most definitely. Like it's a group of Latinx folks from all different parts of the country, all different parts of Latin America. And it's really nice to have that community. There's a small community of us too, Mexican American, women. So I really love that. And I wish we had more of that representation. But like I said, we are working and we're trying. On the flip side, if you work in collections, some of the rules are just very standard. So it is kind of nice to then have that other sense of connection with your coworkers, because regarding your work, you speak the same language. So it's not perfect, but I do enjoy what I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think with that, we're coming up on the hour. So just to be cognizant of time, I'm so appreciative of y'all's time as well for coming and presenting. I want to thank you so much. There are some links in the chat. So Illinois State Museum, National Museum of American History, if you're in town, go visit, and if not, look them up online. You can definitely find out more. Like I mentioned in the very beginning, I very much admire and inspired by the work that both of y'all are doing. And I know that in the future, there's just, even more to come. So we'll stay connected, of course. Thank you so much for coming and presenting with Latinos and Heritage Conservation. And for our audience, our next presentation is going to be in September, and then one more membership webinar in December. So with that being said, thank you all so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and thank you to our audience. Adios, hasta luego.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.